Okay, Timret said. I finished reviewing the files Dr. Roop gave us, and we need to talk about the prison and the mission in general. We've got a little less than a day until we get there at current speed, and as crazy as it sounds, this might be doable.
We were all sitting towards the front of the artifact carrier. Everyone was getting a little stir-crazy, which made it a great time for a briefing.
I'm not done going through the files yet, Mi-san said. Honestly, I've just started. It's hard to make sense of all of it. Well, good thing you've got me to break it down for you then, Tamrat said.
If Tamrat's got a plan, I told the group, I want to hear it.
Well, how are we going to save Earth? Nyana said. That was the bargain as I recall it.
One thing at a time, I said. Let's hear about how we're going to get in. Tamrat sucked in a deep breath as though she were about to take a dive.
Well, the planet is largely uninhabited, except for a relatively small prison, she said, consisting almost exclusively of political prisoners who were forced to work archaeological sites that contain former artifacts. There is security, but not much of it is planet-side. Mainly, their defenses are designed to keep ships from coming out, less because they're worried about escaping prisoners, and more because they don't want anyone stealing their artifacts. According to the military surveys Dr. Root provided, it may be possible to land without being detected, but it'll be pretty much impossible to leave the surface without the orbiting ship knowing.
I had my own thoughts on that problem, though. Well, let's say we're able to land safely and quietly. What do we do then?
Then we make our way to the main Phatic outpost, hack into their system, and find our prisoners. Once we have Zeke's father, our best option is to try and steal a Phatic ship and hope to slip out undetected. That's the worst plan I've ever heard, Nyana said. What makes you think you'll even be able to hack a Phatic computer? I can do anything, Tamrat said.
She can do anything, I agreed.
You can't simply take that as your motto and expect people to act as though it were true,
Nyana said.
Well, I got us this far. This far, Nyana observed, is on a stolen ship on its way to a Phatic prison, and we just happen to have on board a person that they would really like to imprison. I'm not terribly impressed. And let's get back to the business about saving Earth. How are we going to do that?
Tamrat just told you, I said. Our carrier will be detected if we try to leave. So, if we grab a Phatic ship on the way out and deliver it to the Confederation, they reverse engineer it and end the technological advantage the Fads have. We change the balance of power in the galaxy, the Confederation becomes dominant, and the Fads retreat. Therefore, Earth is safe.
If it's so easy, why hasn't anyone done it before? Demanded Nyana.
Because they haven't had us, Steve ventured. Nyana was nearly ready to scream in frustration.
Oh, and I suppose you can do anything too.
Well, not quite anything, he admitted. But I'm not so bad at a few things. And you see, Ducky, that's the point, isn't it? I like the Confederation. They're good blokes, but that cowardly Schuster, if you hadn't noticed, they don't like to get their hands dirty. They wet their nappies when Zeke here fired a few extra missiles at a ship that attacked them first. They have big brains and big ideas, but they don't have a ton of nerve. Now you get some of us hooligans together and you've got another story.
This is so stupid, Nyana said. Don't you see what's going on? Dr. Roop admitted that this is what he intended all along. We're not rebels or heroes. We're just pawns.
No, Charles said.
I don't think Dr. Roop is that deceptive. If we were pawns, it would mean we were sacrificing ourselves in the service of another more meaningful assault. And from what we have seen of the Confederation, I think we know that isn't the case. They've maintained equilibrium for so long that they've forgotten how to fight. That's what we're for.
So, if we're not pawns, Nyana asked, what are we?
Mi-san met her gaze.
Well, the whole game is riding on us, so that makes us the kings.
We came out of our tunnel about 10,000 miles from the planet and went to work. If everything we learned was true, then our sensors were vastly superior to what the Fads have, which meant we were close enough to watch them safely, and as long as no one tunneled out close enough to pick us up, the enemy would never know that we were there. We monitored and recorded Phatic activity for a complete 26-hour cycle, and then I handed the data over to Charles and Nyana. let's assume every rotation's like this one. Study it and find a weakness, and we'll figure out our next move. Meanwhile, Tamrat had been trying to work her way into their computer system, which she explained was much more sophisticated and had far more safeguards than anything she'd seen in the Confederation.
I can overlay a private network onto their planetary grid, she told me. That means we'll be able to communicate through our data bracelets, and they won't know about it. Unless they're specifically looking for it, but if they're looking for us, we'll have bigger problems anyways.
I nodded. Is there anything else?
Yeah, actually, some good news.
She called up a 3-dimensional map of the main compound.
Okay, so this big building here is the main prison. I was able to retrieve their personal specs, and I think we should be able to take them, but that's not the best part. That is that the only projectile weapons on the planet are in this building, the main command bunker. I guess they don't want to risk harming the artifacts because all their firearms are locked up, and they're only for emergencies. If we take that bunker, we take the weapons, and we have more or less an insurmountable tactical advantage.
Well, how do they manage a prison if they're all unarmed? I asked.
Well, they're not exactly unarmed. They have plasma wands, which are essentially high-powered energy sticks. They can be deadly, but on the low settings, they're just meant to hurt, to provide incentive for cooperations. A few guys with plasma wands can control a large prison population, but if we have the PPB pistols, then they have no chance.
6 hours later, after Charles and Diana had reviewed the planetary security data, we had a plan. We sat down and they called up the hologram of the planet.
That trick you used to cheat on us when we did the sim,
Diana said to Steve.
Did you come up with it yourself?
I wish I was that clever, he said. Dr. Roop wanted to run through a couple of sims together. He taught me that one.
Figures, she said. The sun in this system just happens to be extremely active, and there's a great deal of radiation bursting out in regular intervals, just like on the sim. Dr. Roop taught you that little maneuver for when you came here.
I lightly smacked me son on the arm. I told you, Ender's Game.
Don't touch me, she said. But, yeah, I guess it is. So, here's how it will work, Diana said. The patrolling ship's orbit is not genosynchronous. It's not hovering above the prison, but regularly moving all over the planet. That makes things tougher, but just a little. When the cruiser is on the far side of the planet, we wait for the sun to be at the part of its cycle where flares are most active, and then we beeline for the planet. The solar radiation will conceal our ion trail, so we'll be invisible to the FAD sensors. As soon as we hit the atmosphere, we do what Steve did in the sim. We cut the engines and drop down hard and fast to the surface, so if they notice us at all, we'll just look like a meteor. Once we've dropped as far as we can, we fire up the engines and skim under the detection net, landing about 10 miles from the main prison compound.
Well, that sounds too easy, Misan said.
She's leaving out the most significant problem, Charles said. Steve learned how to execute that maneuver on a fairly small moon, which didn't have nearly as strong of a gravity well as an Earth-sized planet. The ship's G-force inhibitors won't be able to compensate for our approach speed. Have any of you allocated skill points in Constitution or Endurance?
Steve, Tamrat, and I said we all had. They were standard spaceflight skills.
Who has the most?
Zeke and I,
Tamrat said. I had no idea how she'd applied her skill points, and I'd never told her about how I applied mine, but respect for privacy wasn't one of her many fine attributes.
Our nanites will keep the rest of us from actually dying, Charles said, but we'll likely pass out. You two have the greatest chance of remaining awake, and long enough to prevent us from crashing to the surface of the planet and being killed in a fiery explosion.
We'll be fine, Tamrat said.
I was less confident, however. What would be Plan B? I said.
Plan B, Diana said, is that we give up and head back to the station. And I like Plan B, in case you were wondering.
Tamrat smiled at me like we were sharing a secret.
Zeke and I can do this.
You know that for sure? I asked.
I know it for sure.
She met my gaze. This was no joke and no boast. She really meant it. Alternatively, I proposed, we could try to slingshot around the sun to generate enough speed to produce a time warp and then rescue the prisoners before they were ever taken.
Is that from a movie? Mi-san asked. I hope you're being a dork, because if you're not, you're a total idiot.
I am being a dork, I assured her. Once they'd finished with the briefing, we'd calculated the time and coordinates for our approach. Tamrat walked us through the prison terrain itself. She called up the map of the compound, pointed out the main buildings and the bunker. The bunker contained a huge underground complex, and it served as the barracks, the armory, and the warehouse for storing former artifacts. Our sensors told us that there were exactly 203 sentients on the surface. Based on their movement patterns, which we were able to get from the computer to analyze, it seemed that only 47 of those were guards. The rest appeared to be prisoners.
The real problem will be once we found Zeke's father, Steve said. We can conceal our descent using gravity and radiation, but there's no way they're gonna miss us when we take off. The whole plan depends on figuring something out once we're past the point of no return. Otherwise, the Fadok cruiser in orbit is gonna stop us before we get anywhere.
We've come all this way, I said, and it hasn't been an accident. Dr. Root picked us for this, and he's been training us for this. I don't believe he would have let us here if he didn't think we could do it. But I have to be honest and say I don't love going in if I can't tell you how we're getting out. You guys have been great, but I can't force you to do this. If you want to turn around and go home, we will. You can drop me off somewhere first. I'll find another way back here, but I'm not going to make you take that risk.
Good idea, Nyana said. Let's go back. Well, for what? Mi-san asked. To be arrested for theft and kicked out of the Confederation? If we don't come back with that Fadok ship, we've done all of this for nothing. I say we keep going.
Charles tapped my arm excitedly, and then pointed at Nyana.
She's the prime golden robot, and Mi-san is the beeping competent silver robot.
I gave him a fist bump. You know, you're learning a lot, my friend.
We've already done the impossible, Charles said to Nyana, and we've been led to it. We may as well see where our streak ends.
Fine, Nyana said, but I'm going to complain the whole time.